related questions, feel free to ask. Okay, the first VNC says, what do you think of the advantages of playing anonymously like in the Bodog pool? So, I mean, there are a couple potential advantages. One is, I know there's a lot of people, and I would say BrPC does some of this as well, where, you know, we're looking at population tendencies and trying to exploit population. I think this hand, so this board in general, I think is a larger c-bet. And then this hand in particular quite likes it, so I'm going to go for it. Yeah, exploiting pool tendencies is nice. I think one of the extremely nice things about it is that there are a lot of people who will do things in anonymous pools that they would not do in non-anonymous pools. Kind of a weird call. I think I'm just going to bet large again. That's what our hand wants to do, and I'll leave a tiny bit of room for him to do something stupid. Maybe he just has something good, but yeah, I mean, that hand is super standard. Queen 9 suited, I believe, just goes for it. One advantage that I find for myself is, I don't know, sometimes I feel like, ideally I want to play a GTO-ish strategy. And sometimes when you're playing in non-anonymous games, it's just hard to stop yourself from getting into the leveling wars and dynamics, which I would prefer to mostly avoid. So to some degree, I think it's nice for just being able to execute and not worrying so much about, oh, this guy 3-bet me 3 of the last 4 hands, or, you know, these things that these random patterns that we talk ourselves into mattering. You know, of course, the disadvantage is it's significantly harder to identify who the recreationals are. I mean, sometimes you can get hints because people are, you know, short stacks, but that is far from perfect. I mean, I am somewhat often short stacked because the auto rebuy doesn't work all of the time. And so, yeah, there are definitely disadvantages as well. But overall, I quite like it. It's funny though, I've talked to other people who basically refuse to play on Bodog because they don't want to deal with the anonymous thing of like, you know, I just don't know if this guy's completely insane or if he's a nit. And you will certainly make some folds that you later see you were against a maniac, and, you know, the other way around. But I think just pure check here with Queen 8. Again, I'm checking range on the flop 3-way. And we have some amount of showdown value. I would say quite far from 0, but not particularly high. Versus 1 blind, yeah, I mean, easy call. Queen 8, so I believe is a fold if you are 2.5xing, although even then, no, maybe it's still an open then, but for the min raise it's an open. With the limper, I typically play a tiny bit tighter than I would without the limper. I used to play a tiny bit wider, but I have, and I think I mentioned this in my last stream as well, I've definitely started to see more limp raises, which makes me a little less eager to ISO super wide. I think in one of my streams I almost recommended that people try playing a reasonable limping strategy and see how much they get ISO'd. I doubt that caught on, but if it did, I mean, yeah, I do think if you're playing any kind of reasonable under the gun limp strategies, and there are some, like there's a couple guys, what's his name? I think it was like Eccentric BG or something, old school reg, who used to do a lot of limping, and you know, it's solvers might not do it, but that doesn't make it bad. And if you execute reasonably well and people behind you are ISOing like 40% of hands or more because they assume you're a fish, that's going to go quite well. Again, I'm just going to range check here. Our hand will continue. Interesting sizing from villain. Yeah, I think I'll start with the call and go from there. We will be folding the turn here. If he checks back, pretty easy bluff on the river versus another pot. I think just very clear fold. Do you play in these games first VNC? And if so, how do you like the anonymous? I came up only playing on stars. Well, I mean, this is kind of like my second poker career. My first poker career, I played everywhere, but there were no anonymous sites. And then of late, I have only been playing on stars. Or I started only playing on stars. And then when I moved over to Bodog, pretty much right away, I really liked the anonymous. I have been experimenting with using pot on a lot of these 2 high card boards. You can watch a Run It Once video I just made if you're a Run It Once subscriber. Thanks. The leveling thing is real, especially if playing every day and against the same guys. I'm going to consider playing on Bodog. Is there other sites like it? To the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure about Party. I feel like someone told me Party is anonymous, but I have never played, or I haven't played on Party in forever, basically. So don't quote me on that. But here, I actually think Big is the only size that really makes any sense, and our hand likes to bet. But yeah, maybe Party, and Bodog is the only other one I know about. Yeah, and I totally agree that the leveling part, it's very much becomes part of the game. I don't think it's something that I'm particularly good at. And so I would rather just play a good strategy and let other people, do their own leveling and just ignore it. But it's hard. It's hard to ignore it. And I think a lot of the leveling wars that happen almost come from randomness. Like, there are times where someone's just gonna 3-bet you 3 times in a row. That's just how the cards come. And I think it's so hard to see that as a human and not adjust to it. Ace King there. I think solvers play some flats. I'm mostly jamming, but I did roll. Queen Jack going to be basically pure call against a raise. Versus Min, I'm a little tempted, but we'll still call on that roll. We'll see what sizing he uses. Yeah, I think versus that, pretty clear fold. If he goes like, min raise and then bets 1 blind or something, we probably will defend this, but not first 3 quarters. King 10 off is close on a 7-8 fold. That's one thing I found. So like I mentioned at the very start, I've been playing some on 888 Ontario. So where I live has geography locked some sites. So there's only a handful of regs, and so yeah, you do end up playing quite a lot with the same guys, and it's definitely a different experience than the anonymous pools. So very poor flop for the hijack raiser. One where big blind should play some donks, not quite as many as if it were more connected, but it's already a low frequency c-bet board for hijack when donks are allowed. So when they're not allowed, I'm inclined to play very high frequency check, and I think this hand anyways will do quite a lot of checking. And yeah, very strong board for big blind. He will get to win the pot a lot. And 9-8 suited, I probably should have rolled. I think it can bet small. Check is going to be okay too. And very clear check. Occasionally we will win, but not super often. But yeah, I think small bet turn. I at least should have rolled for. Small 3-bet, so you're going to defend a lot wider, but I still think these offsuit ace-x are just going to get folded. Playing only at GG right now because of rake back, but considering adding another site. Does Bodog have a good rake back deal? So I've actually never played a hand on GG. I was under the impression the rake was very high, but I guess maybe that means that you can get good rake back too. Hey Alan, thanks for the good luck. But yeah, so Bodog, I actually get 0 rake back on Bodog. I already had an account. I'm under the impression that if you 3-bet fold and call, I think are both okay. I'm under the impression that if you have a new account, maybe you can get rake back. On a 3, we will defend the 9s. I wish I had rake back because the rake is quite high, quite high on Bodog. But yeah, alas, I do not. Jesus. I think I'm just going to fold. I think this sizing tends to be somewhat underbluffed, especially from weaker players. I don't know. I imagine that's at least somewhat close. Maybe I'll mark that one. No GTO Wizard giveaway, just so you guys know. today, but I will at the end. Oh shoot, am I not? Are these hands not importing? What's going on? Oh no, they are. Okay. I will mark that 9's hand. Mostly I'm just curious about what Solver wants to do. And here with King High, I am inclined to give up. Yeah, nah. Okay, I'd like that one back, but I'll blame the distractedness looking through the hands. Typically on these very low boards, I do a lot of checking. Yeah. From what I've seen, it's, so looking at this 9's hand again, from what I've seen, so for a while, I think this pot size bet was basically always over pairs. That's less true than it used to be. I think this is closer than it was maybe 6 months ago. I have definitely seen more people use the big bets. I'm still inclined to think that a guy who's likely a weaker player, based on the broken stack preflop, is probably a little weighted toward value. Someone wants me to buy some viewers. I'm good. Yeah, I think 9's is going to be a pretty clear continue versus most sizes, and versus pot. I don't know. Feels gross. Polero says, hey Steve, do you live in the US? No, I live in Canada. Yeah, Kingston, Ontario, which is kind of like halfway between Toronto and Montreal, if you know the area. So on these low boards, I typically use the small size, and this hand will bet fairly often. From the later positions, I might size up. From the earlier positions, we just don't hit this board very hard. On this particular one, you probably can do some sizing up. And then here, when one of the straight draws gets there, I don't think I want to use pot. So I'll use half pot as my only size and bet my hand fairly often. Kind of a disaster to get raised, but definitely still plenty of hands to get value from. And excellent river. So we will value bet if check to. As far as sizing goes, I think something around pot makes sense. Plenty of 7x and 8x that can call us. And very easy to find bluffs for us. Hands like Jack 10, Jack 9, 10, 9 are the extremely obvious ones. And then, yeah, plenty of other creative choices, ace 5 suited, ace 3 suited, etc. So this one is not a pure open, and not a pure 3-bet either. Typically around 50 big blinds, I start to use smaller opens in the small blind. I don't have any fantastic reasoning for it, but... and then ace king can do kind of anything here. On a 2 we'll bet, but checking is fine as well. And it's quite rare that I use any size other than quarter pot blind versus blind. Turn will mostly be checked. And I don't think this hand needs to bluff on the river. We will still beat a few other ace size. But he says, hey, good luck, thanks. And yeah, versus pot. All right, it's just a fold. Ace 10 8, you can use kind of any size you want to. And this hand can turn itself into a bluff a little bit if you're using the big sizing. For the small sizing, I mean, everything will bet sometimes, but I think this hand doesn't have much incentive. And then on the turn again, I don't think there's a whole lot of incentive. I think once we check flop, we are mostly playing this hand to show it down. we'll have to consider if we face a river bet. But yeah, here, I mean, you just want, I mean, you have plenty of ace-x in your check-back range, and a reasonable number of eights. Those are going to be much better bluff catches than this. It's not the worst one in the world, but I think I'll just fold. King 9 suited, we'll 4-bet something like 25%. Call the rest. Interesting flop. This hand mostly calls blind versus blind. Tempting 3-bet, and probably honestly a decent 3-bet. In that, one of the things you see, this one I'm very unsure of. I'm just going to click fold this deep, but probably that's a little too nitty. Yeah, one of the funny things you see with some of these 3-betting ranges is they will change dramatically based on whether the raiser uses 4-bet jams. So a hand like Queen 10 suited really hates to get big 4-bet, or especially 4-bet jammed on. On a 19 we'll bet, but it can do both. And so yeah, if you're only facing small 4-bets, and especially if you're never getting jammed on, Queen 10 suited will do better than if you are sometimes getting jammed on. I think just pretty clear check back. I would play quite polar on the turn here, where probably pot's the only size I'm going to use, and it's going to be something like ace king. It will be the bottom of the value range. You could also play a strategy. We're going to go very large here. I mean, maybe I should even just jam. And this hand can bet quite often. 71, I think it's close. Easy fold. Yeah, but I think on that ace turn, you could also play a strategy where you bet a lot and bet small. But I think it makes more sense to play the polar one. But he says, how do you proceed to keep focus if only playing regular tables? Action's very slow, and I sometimes get very bored. Trying not to add too much tables to improve quality, but sometimes it's hard. Yeah, I mean, so for me, I will typically have a zone table going. It's rare that I only play 4 regular tables. When it does happen, I just try to spend more time playing as if I'm studying. And so really like, okay, on this board, I want to bet this size, and here are the hands I would bet, and here are the hands I would check. That's a weird spot. I kind of want to just fold, but I think with the backdoor flush draw, I will peel one. But I don't know, very odd 4 ways. Maybe I should just fold. But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough balancing act. If you want enough tables so that you are, you don't want so many tables that you can't focus, but you want enough tables that you kind of has your attention. Yeah, maybe I should have just folded. So yeah, tough balancing act. For me, I agree. Like 4 regular tables does feel very slow. I find I've played plenty of sessions with 6 regular tables, and I find that usually decent. Lets you focus a little more on the players too. But yeah, I think another thing that I have tried in the past, it's been a while since I've done this, but it's to like pick a guy at each table and maybe, pick the weaker player if possible, and just watch every hand they play and do your very best to hand read and figure out what they are doing and how they are thinking. I think that's one thing that when we play online, and obviously the anonymous tables help with this. I think versus pot, I'm just gonna again just make this slightly nitty fold. It's easy to forget how big an edge you can get on someone, especially a weaker player, if you have some idea of how they are thinking about the game. So I think that's a decent exercise. But it's tough. I would say I'm not, by no means, an expert. Music I also find helpful. Currently, I'm listening to some kind of lo-fi hip-hop radio that Max once recommended to me. I do want to have some ace-x in my check-back range, so I will check this on a 60. Very clear appeal. Don't think we ever want to raise this hand. And very easy check. I don't know. We're getting, what are we getting? 5-1. I mean, it's actually not the worst bluff candidate either. Let's go with the bluff. Don't bluff that guy. Not a good bluff. I think the 6 is a decent-ish card. Maybe the ace high is just too strong and we can call. I think without a spade, we are mostly checking back the turn. Sizing-wise, I would use pot or bigger. And here I like betting versus likely weaker player. And then the question is, do you turn it into a bluff? I mean, solver will not. I'll put it that way. So yeah, I think I'm just going to check back and lose. But and here, don't want to 2-barrel on that card. I will bluff the river though if he checks. Versus 2 blinds, I think again we'll go for the bluff raise. One out of two. We're mostly just targeting ace highs and like very randomly played hands. But I think especially from the recreational players, they will have those hands. Like I would not be at all surprised to see ace 3, ace 4, ace 6, ace 8, etc. Again, a spot I like to use pot as my size. We will check back some top and bottom, so I did roll for that one. Generally, the top 2 and better will never check, but top and bottom will do some checking. And mostly betting again, and pot is my size here as well. Interesting run out. I think this hand is very close. Oh shit, and I'm gonna run out of time. Well, that's unfortunate. That one I want to look at. I do think my hand is a bet. I think ace king has to check. And my hand I think is quite close. Timeout is not great. Let me see if I can mark that one. Typically how those spots work is, so the 4 straight makes it very weird. He won't have a ton of straights, but he can certainly have ace 2. I still think my hand is going to be a bet on the river. I'm also really unsure of sizing though. Typically how those work is that you bomb the turn with your ace king, and check that on the river, but bet all the 2 pairs. Sometimes on the very best rivers, ace king can bet as well. Why can't I find that hand? All right, somehow this session is getting lumped in with the session I played earlier, so it's becoming very hard to find hands. There it is. Okay. Yeah, on the 4th straight, I'm not sure. I mean, he definitely has some worse 2 pairs. He can probably also have a bunch of ace 10 though, so I imagine ace 5 is close. Pure 3 bet here for me. I imagine ace 5 is close, but is a bet. And ace king will be a pure check, is my expectation. But then sizing, I'm also very unsure. I don't think you want to pot it. Yeah, interesting. So my guess, looking at it now, post-hand, is that my hand wants to bet something like 70%. And that ace king will be a pure check. But we'll check it after. Typically, I like the fast pace of the zone, but I will say that, yeah, streaming makes it a little tougher. Pure 3 bet here. I still like to roll just to keep my timings a little more consistent. And very clear bet versus, actually on 90 I don't hate check, but I think versus likely weaker player, I will just go with the small bet and let him do funny things. And yeah, I think check works very nicely on this turn. You'll have plenty of weak hands to bet. And then on this river, I think you have two choices. You can either jam and target a jack, or you can check and hope to induce from the weaker hands. I'll go with jam this time on the lower roll. Yeah, just basically a cooler for him. He can probably just bet the turn though. He'd ace jack off. I mean, pre-flop should probably just fold, but after that, not much you're gonna do. I think leaning fold slightly in these positions.